Commands and Colors Napoleonics is a system that I enjoy very much. I enjoyed it pretty much since it came out. I like the Commands and Color system in general. I like the Napoleonic iteration of that system better than I like the ancient one. It's a simple system, but it offers a lot of fun. It allows me to play a full battle in an hour, a little over an hour. I can introduce non-wargamers to wargaming using this. So in any case, I can play to a variety of people that maybe I wouldn't be able to interest in other types of games. And I just enjoy the scenarios that have been released so far. Now, a new expansion came out. I played all the previous expansions, but the last one came out, and the last one that I tried is the Prussian Army. In this box you find all of the wooden blocks needed to create the Prussian Army. You find all of the stickers that you need to apply on those blocks to create the Prussian Army. Oh, man. Applying all of those stickers is always such a boring task, always such a pain, but you know what? A gamer's gotta do what a gamer's gotta do, so you gotta do it. If you are playing a block game, that's a rite of passage that you have to submit yourself to. So you find the blocks, you find the stickers, you find a scenario book with some special rules also explained to you that will apply to the Prussian Army. Couple of other things, but that's the main thing. As for the scenarios, 20 new scenarios. This is really good value for the money if you think that it allows you to play 20 brand new battles. And really, having the ability to play so many new battles is probably the main reason of interest in the set. Also, having a new army, of course, is always fun because you get to know a new system of forces, a new system of possible skills, abilities, limitations, advantages. As for the Prussians, so what do the Prussians bring to the table that makes them different from previous armies in the Napoleonic system? Well, they're tough. They are very motivated. The only new rule that comes with the set is that the Prussians use iron will counters. Scenario instructions will allow you will provide the Prussian player with iron will counters, a certain amount of those in various scenarios, and you can spend them to annul flag results during combat. So you do not have to retreat in those circumstances, but it is a limited resource. They are tough, but not infinitely so. Since I mentioned something technical here about the rules in this video, I'm not going to rehash the general rules behind the Commands and Colors Napoleonic system. You can watch my original video for the game if you want to have those covered or refreshed. So as for new rules, there is pretty much only that one. As for the Prussians per se, they are a good, not excellent army. And I'm simply talking in terms of how hard they hit in the battlefield, not in terms of how fun it is to play with them. It is really fun. I really like this scenario. And there are simply challenges from the fact that they're not necessarily the best army out there. They do not best the French when you compare the skills of individual units. For example, the Prussian line infantry is fairly strong, is reasonably strong. They get a combat die for each block, but they do not get the extra one that the French do in close combat, or better, not always. If the Prussian are attacking in close combat and they have not moved, or they're battling back, which is another form of attacking when you're not moving, then they can put themselves together and they get an extra die when they are resolving combat. So they can get that extra impact during their attack, but only certain circumstances. The Prussian cavalry is smaller, the individual units are smaller than the French units, so there's a disadvantage there. But as you will see in the scenarios that I'm going to show, there are other ways in which the gameplay has been balanced for enjoyment purposes when confronting the strong French with the slightly less effective Prussians. So actually, let me tell a little bit about the scenario. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the scenarios that I played, and at the end we'll reconvene here in my gamer cave, and I'll share maybe some extra thoughts about Commands and Colors, Napoleonics, the Prussian army. Setup of the scenario depicting the Battle of Jena, 14 October 1806, early morning. Here, I just set up the game. I haven't played it yet. I'm setting it up, then I'm telling you a little bit about it, and then I'll play, so I don't have to then set it up again later just to film my segment. Here, the French units are ready to attack. They outnumber the Prussians. The French player has 21 units, as opposed to 18 that the Prussian player controls. However, the Prussian player has a much better position. The Prussian player is controlling hills and towns at the beginning of the game. These towns and the hills, of course, give good defensive benefits to the player that is sitting there. Also, controlling the majority of the town hexes grants a victory banner to the player that controls the majority. And since the Prussian player controls 3 towns out of 4, 3 town hexes out of 4 at the beginning of the game, the Prussian player already starts with a victory banner. The Prussian player also has 3 iron will counters. So a good position for the Prussian player, as opposed to the French player that is sitting here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a soccer field, and because of these forest hexes, which kind of narrow the available area, the French player will be forced to march in this open terrain, which of course will be tricky. It will make the French units a very appetizing target for the Prussian units. One good thing for the French player, not all hope is lost, the French player has a better hand of cards here. The hand of cards for the Prussian player in this game is of 5 command cards, and the French player has 6. So definitely superior command there. So I'm interested here. Numbers and superior command versus much better position. Let's see who's gonna win the contest. Scenario for the Battle of Halle, or better, for the first half of it. This is the morning segment. There is also a larger, longer, meatier segment, which is the afternoon, which I'm going to play next. But for now, we are here in the morning, and this is a small scenario. A scenario that probably you could use an introductory scenario if you're introducing somebody who's unfamiliar with the game, to the game. Now, what's happening here is that the French are marching towards that area there, and in particular, they're trying to gain and retain control of the bridges. The French player gains a temporary victory point when a French unit occupies a bridge at the beginning of a turn. And there is a good number of French units here, with some artillery units here, some line units here, and light units here. And also we have some light units here. The Prussians are the defenders here, and they are here, so at least with the opportunity for this heavy cavalry unit to try and flank the advancing French, and then some small, kind of isolated, sad, scared-looking Prussian units scattered around. There's an artillery unit there, which probably will advance on that hill and start firing on the French units that try to take control of the bridge. But other than that, I do not know that the unit will do much else. It will take, I guess, a couple of activations if the Prussians will try to move that infantry unit where it matters. But come to think of it, actually placing those guys on the bridge may not be such a bad idea. The Prussians really seem like they may have a hard time just because they're so heavily outnumbered. On the other hand, they had the luxury of just waiting for the French to advance, and so the luxury of firing against the French before the French make contact. Small scenario. I think we'll play pretty fast. The The victory conditions are based on simply 4 victory banners, so shouldn't be a long scenario. And I think it would provide a decent warm-up for the next larger part of the Battle of Halle. Setup for the Battle of Halle, afternoon segment. This battle is the natural sequel of the scenario that I showed you earlier. The French have taken control of the bridges historically, and this is why at the beginning of the scenario you see how they did take advantage of their gain, and they were able to rapidly deploy units on this other side of the river and to take control of the little town of Halle. This leaves the Prussians in an awkward position, and since they see that the enemy is reforming and the enemy is going to be pretty strong once they finish crossing the river and they reform on this side, the Prussians decide to leave the area. In this scenario, the Prussian player can gain victory banners and by exiting units from the board. And in particular, a victory banner for each unit that leaves the board from one of these 4 hexes. So here's a problem. The Prussian player can just try to go for a fight and to score victory banners simply by fighting frontally against the French, but yet there is quite a number of units that is arriving from that direction. Or on the other hand, the Prussian can try to score points by exiting units here. In order to gain victory, a player needs to accumulate 8 victory banners, so just by exiting a couple of units that could be a big advantage, but on the other hand it could make the Prussian units that remain on the board even more outnumbered. I guess maybe an idea would be for the Prussians to move in this direction, attack here, try to inflict some damage, and then when they take some damage to retreat in this direction to try to exit the board before they get annihilated and they give victory banners to the opponent. I'm gonna play this scenario in solitary, playing both sides at the best of my possibilities, and I guess that this probably will be the main strategy for the Prussians. I do not know yet how the French are going to act. Well, the idea would be, of course, to take advantage of all of these awesome units here, but we'll see what the Prussians do. I think in this case, the action will be led, the overall action in this scenario will be led by the main decisions that the Prussians make. Okay, let's play this. Battle of Grossbeeren, August 23rd, 1813. The French are situated in this area, and they are facing a pretty scary line of Prussian units that is also covering part of this flank of the French side, of the French army. The French are heavily outnumbered. There are 18 French units that have to face 26 Prussian units. On the plus side, many of those Prussian units are pretty unreliable. There is a mix of fairly good units in there, but then also some militia units and some reserve units that will tend to disappear from the board if they roll flags, because, for example, the militia moves 3 axes per flag result during combat, and the reserve units retreat 2 axes per flag result. So it can be pretty punitive, and if you consider that they're already kind of close to the edge, most likely militia units, if they get attacked, they're likely to lead the board. If they go on the attack, they may be able to inflict some damage before they actually disintegrate and disappear. Interesting situation here that we have 2 artillery units of the French and 2 Prussian artillery units close to one another, so there may be some mutual bombardment there. Other things, terrain, there is this line of hills here that I think will play some role in the way these 2 sections of the 2 armies will face each other. These 2 axes here and the windmill form a temporary a majority victory banner objective, and not a regular one worth a single victory point or single victory banner, but 2 victory banners. As you can see, the French are in a perfect position to seize the opportunity to take control of these 2 axes, which means they will receive 2 victory banners soon after the beginning of the game. So what do we have here? Smaller number of French units, large number of fairly brittle Prussian units, but I should also point out that the potentially low morale of those units is counterbalanced by the fact that in this scenario the Prussians have 4 iron wheel counters, and also another important thing is that the hand of cards is of the same size for both players. Both players have a hand of 5 command cards. So, seems pretty big. It's definitely a big scenario. It's the largest I played so far, and not by chance victories based on a large number of victory banners. It takes 10 victory banners for one of the 2 players to be able to win the game. Grossbeeren was a large scenario. Ligny, 1815, is even more so. There's just an amazing amount of units on the board. It takes quite a while to set up this little monster here, this mini monster. A lot of French units here in a pretty tight formation with scary line of artillery pieces here, and a more dispersed group of, or should I say, system of small groups of Prussian units, which are, however, occupying good defensive positions behind the brook, the Ligny brook, in town hexes, things like that. The number of cards that the players have is pretty large. The Prussian player has 5 command cards in hand, and the French player 6. The Prussian player also has 5 iron will counters. That's pretty good, but like in the previous scenario, the Prussian player will really need those because there are some units here which are pretty impressionable. Reserve units and militia units that can just run away easily, so the Prussian player will need to use those to prevent those units from running away, while stronger units are reinforcing the front line. Here, the Prussian player is the defender, if nothing else, because the Prussian player is occupying good defensive axes, which also produce victory banners. Town hexes, the windmill there, a church there, all form a single victory banner majority, a majority victory banner objective, which is worth 2 points for the Prussian player, and the Prussian player controls the majority of those hexes at the beginning of the scenario, and actually they can generate 3 points, 3 victory banners for the French player, so that's pretty good. The Ligny brook divides the map in 2 areas, so this definitely will be a major element in the landscape and in the terrain. However, at least it does not have battle restrictions, but it does stop movement and it does stop charges in case one of the players is using the charge card from the command deck. And also, there are a bunch of bridges, more than you would find in other scenarios. So it's going to be interesting, I think, because it's not like a hard limit, it's not like a wall, but of course it will slow down units that will try to act across it if, for example, the French player tries to go across the brook to take control of objective access. So I think it's going to be interesting. I see this as sort of like a flexible, not a soft limit, a challenge. I don't know yet how this is going to work. I assume that the French player will try to use the bridges, even though that will cause bottlenecks, which means that movement then will be a little predictable, and there are some objective access here. So if the French player splits towards these 2 bottlenecks here to go to the other side of the brook, then these 2 objective access will be neglected. Interesting challenges ahead here. I can't wait to try this scenario. I think it's going to be a while. It's going to take a while to play because it is pretty large. Victory goes to the first player that manages to put together 11 victory banners. Wavre, June 18th, 1815. Here we have the French, and we have a scary number of French line units. French line units are pretty strong, are particularly tough, especially in close combat, and this pretty impressive army is trying to pass that river. Looking at the bigger scenario here, the French are trying to pass the river to outflank the Prussians, and in order to do so, they found a spot where the Prussian resistance is particularly weak. In fact, here, as you can see, the Prussians are scattered around their side of the map, and also if you take a closer look, you will see a lot of militia units and reserve units which are really of low quality. Again, like we saw in similar scenarios, however, the defenders, the Prussians in this case, have the advantage of terrain because the French do need to go past that river. In order to do so, they need to use the bridges. The river is unfordable, impassable, so they need to use the bridges, and some of the bridges will be guarded by units that on the other side are sitting in town hexes, and that also gives a considerable advantage to defenders in those hexes. But still, the Prussian units are pretty weak by themselves. They do have 3 iron will counters at least. As per victory conditions, the French player wins victory banners by putting units across the river. The French player earns a victory banner for each unit that is on a bridge or across the river. And the French player cannot spend too much time preparing for that. The French player really is pressed for time, because there's another victory condition that one applies to the Prussian player. The Prussian player gains a victory banner for each scout command card that he plays. That means that if the French player just sits around, the Prussian player can simply win by going through the deck and playing all of those cards. So the French player really needs to move fast and to smash through the Prussian reserves, and the Prussian reserves need to eliminate enough French units to defend the ground enough to score at least some points, and probably by supplementing those points with victory banners from the cards, then they stand, I believe, a chance of winning the game. I haven't played this scenario yet, but I think that this is how it's gonna be. A quick, desperate charge from the French, and various attempts of biding for time from the Prussians. But let's see how it goes. I enjoyed this expansion very, very, very much. These are good scenarios. In terms of just enjoyment, how much they are enjoyable and fun to play, I have to say that I had more fun playing these, and I had more enjoyment playing these scenarios than I remember having when I was playing scenarios from the previous expansions, which I enjoyed already. But here there are many interesting challenges, and the most interesting among which is probably that the Prussians are indeed at a disadvantage when it comes to sheer confrontation of forces with the French, but there are the ways in the scenarios, so things that have been hardwired within the scenarios, that balance things and that make playing the scenarios exciting and interesting for both sides. Usually what happens is that you have scenarios where the Prussians are weak and they have some unreliable units, but they have the advantage of terrain, they have the advantage of being the defenders, which does not mean that then the Prussian player simply sits there, waits for the French to advance and starts attacking with range attacks and has that advantage. The Prussian player often has that advantage, but it's not a dull thing. You don't just sit there and wait. You have to make the terrain work for you. You have to take chances by placing your units in positions where they may be able to deal the first blow to the approaching French, but by doing so you're also exposing them to danger. You need to figure out ways of getting your weakened units away from the front line before they're completely annihilated, and then that would be pretty bad, because of course that would give a huge advantage to the other player, and you have to figure out ways of getting those out of the first line and to replace them with other fresher, stronger units, which you may not have after a while. There's many cases in which the Prussian player is outnumbered, and heavily so, outnumbered, outgunned. In a sense, from that point of view, there are scenarios in which playing the Prussian player is more exciting and more dramatic than playing the French player, and other ones in which it is the opposite. However, I found that most of the scenarios that they played ended up pretty close. I didn't see any terrible problem of balance. Some scenarios are tougher for one side, but most of the scenarios ended within, say, 2-3 banners of difference, some less, some just like single banner of difference. So I'm very pleased with these scenarios, and with the Prussian army as a new addition to the commands and colors system. 20 new scenarios, that's a lot of battles that you can play. And the ones that I tried are really fun. This is a really good set. I think you get good value, actually excellent value for your money. I enjoyed all of the previous expansions of the Commands and Colors system, but I have to say this is my favorite one. I think that this one is a notch above the other ones. Commands and Colors, Napoleonics, the Prussian Army. If you are into the Commands and Colors system, I think this is one that you really need to have.